Hi, I'm Matthew S. Robinson. I'm a line producer and filmmaker, and I'm here to give you several tips on how to produce a horror film from the script to screen because suspense doesn't have to be expensive. First, let's take a look at Leah Simmonsby's Insatious. Kaboom! Orange columns of fire burst out of every opening in the house, twisting into billowing black clouds of smoke that dissolve into the night sky. Now, this is a really cool scene from Leah, but as you can imagine, because of the explosion, that bumps up the price a little bit. You could go the miniatures route, and that would save some money, but you still need to find someone who can make miniatures and make it look convincing when they explode. And we're talking, that's still going to save about tens of thousands of dollars. If you do it for real, it gets really high up there. $250,000 range quite easily because you're going to need fire safety, pyrotechnics, all these sort of things, including the fire marshal on set. Next, we have Jerem Scott Andrews with their script, Shark in the Pond. A kayaker paddles as fast as his arms can take him, but the shark rises up and bites into his kayak, flipping him over. Underwater, the kayaker hangs upside down and struggles to right himself. He screams and flails. The shark comes back for him and bites off his head. Above water, the kayak rolls back over, revealing the now headless kayaker, still seated and holding his paddle. Blood squirts from his mangled neck. Holy scriptures, dude. All right, this is going to be an awesome, awesome kill. And obviously, in the genre of horror, you want this to be as practical as possible. So I'm going to be assuming when I look at this that this is going to be on location. And because of this, you're going to need a bunch of stuff. You need a stunt performer who knows how to convincingly use a kayak and is trained in it. You're going to need a stunt coordinator. Now, remember, stunt coordinators are always paid the basic agreement rate, regardless of the budget of your film. Stunt performers do kind of slide up and down based on scale. You're going to also need marine safety, aquatic safety, a set medic, a permit, obviously, because you're shooting on location. You're going to need a cinematographer and camera equipment that can be shot underwater. Maybe it's something as small as a GoPro. Maybe it's something a little bit more robust that scales it from about a couple $100 just with a camera to several $1,000s for that day of rentals. Once you're doing all that, then you still got to have the kayak and you got to have the rigging from the G&E team and the safety stunt team that's going to allow the kayak to be underwater and then flip back up. And then finally, you're going to need some sort of dummy or some sort of contraption for either the stunt actor or stunt actor away from the kayak to flip back up with the dummy and the blood squirting on cue. And if you want to get that blood squirting on cue, you're either going to need that remote pressure pump or someone who is hiding themselves on that kayak, perhaps the stunt performer themselves, squirting out the blood coming out of the kayak. So on the low end, you're talking at least 40K for this one scene alone. I would budget this in the 80K plus range to get this one super cool kill done. Now let's take a look at the script participant written by Ariel Relaford. This is a dream sequence. Tori takes a deep breath and opens her eyes. She's seated on a park bench near a pond. The sun shines, the birds chirp, and no one else is around. A perfect paradise. The dog's mouth unhinges and opens. Two more arms reach out towards Tori. She opens her mouth to scream, and two hands fish their way into Tori's mouth and pry it open. Tori yelps as the arms rip her jaws apart. Yeah, this is really rad. Really rad scene. But a couple things. First of all, this is in a park, so you're gonna need a permit, and that's gonna cost you 100 to, if you're in Los Angeles, a little shy of $1,000. You're going to possibly need crowd control with your PAs and your team. Then you get everyone here, and you're going to need a dog. Now, I directed dogs before. Dogs are difficult to direct because they don't exactly do what you want them to. You just kind of have to keep filming until they do exactly how you imagined it or close to it. And you'll need a wrangler. You will need coordinators. There's services like the Animal Protection Agency, which works with SAG, but on the low end, including rental of the animal, the wrangler, and the coordinator, we're talking about $300 on the low end to easily over $600. That's also not including you having to pay for the transportation of the dog. Not to mention, this needs to be monitored by the American Humane Association. Those are the people who say no animals were harmed in the making of this film. Guess what? That's a very important thing to have on your film, and you need to work with them to be on set. So after you do all that, now you have to have prosthetics, which requires a special effects supervisor and possibly a special effects engineer or artist. SFX is the shorthand for that. They're going to be on making sure this prosthetic jaw can rip apart, the hands come out, all that kind of jazz. And then you also will probably need a VFX or visual effects artist. These are people who do the digital CGI effects. They're also going to be on set to monitor this and see what may need to be cleaned up in post to make these prosthetics and these arms reaching out and ripping open her jaw as realistic as possible coming out of the dog again. So maybe this dog ends up becoming fully CGI or a mix of practicals and CGI or completely practicals. If it's completely practicals, you're probably looking at something like a puppeteer, which also requires a specialist to come in. Puppeteers also have their own guild. All of this coming together to make this one super scary scene. But on the low end, we're talking about six, $7,000. On the more realistic end, we're getting close to about 40, 50K just to pull off this one scene. So I know that's a big range. Depends kind of how much you're doing practically or CGI. But to get this really cool and rad dream sequence, gonna cost you a little bit of money. All right, everyone, that's all the time I have for today. If you haven't checked out the dead list, please do so. It's exhilarating, it's spooky, it's a ton of fun. Check me out on my socials. Thank you, Ash, for having me. Thank you to the dead list. And hopefully, we will be seeing these scares on a screen near you very, very soon.